The fog rolled into Whitmore like a living thing, thick, heavy, and strangely deliberate. Street lights glowed as faint orange halos, their light swallowed by the mist before it could touch the ground. It was close to midnight, and the town was asleep, except for one figure moving along the cobblestone path that led to the old railway station. Clara Bennett pulled her coat tighter around her as the chill bit into her hands. She had grown used to odd assignments, small town scandals, forgotten landmarks, stories no one else cared to write, but this was different. The editor had only said, "Go to the station. Something's happening." No explanation, no context, just a tip from a nervous caller who refused to leave a name. The Whitmore station had been closed for nearly 20 years. Trains no longer ran through the town. The tracks had rusted, the clocks had stopped, and ivy had crawled over every wall. Yet as Clara approached, she heard something she hadn't heard in decades, a faint metallic echo, the sound of wheels on rails. Her steps slowed. The fog thickened. Through the white curtain of mist, a light emerged, dull and yellow at first, then brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. A horn echoed in the distance, long and mournful. Clara froze. It couldn't be real. There were no scheduled trains, no functioning lines, not even power to the signal lamps. The sound grew louder, closer, and then, out of the fog, it appeared. An old train, massive, black, and gleaming like polished coal, slid silently into the station. Its wheels didn't screech, its smoke didn't rise. It moved as if gliding through air, guided by something unseen. Clara stood transfixed, her breath caught somewhere between awe and terror. She stepped back as the train came to a stop. Steam hissed softly from beneath the metal frame, curling around her legs. A sign above the first carriage flickered with a faint glow, though the letters were nearly illegible under the grime. She wiped at it with her glove and read, "The Whitmore line, Est, 1912, but that was impossible. The Whitmore line had been dismantled after the accident and explosion that had killed 27 passengers one foggy night in 1956. The official report said the line was destroyed beyond repair. Clara's pulse quickened. She took out her phone, raising it to take a photo, but the screen remained black. No signal, no response. It was as if the world itself refused to acknowledge what stood before her. The doors of the nearest carriage slid open with a hiss, releasing a gust of cold, metallic air. Inside, faint golden light shimmered across worn velvet seats. The carriage was empty, silent, waiting. Clara hesitated. Her instincts screamed to run, to leave whatever this was untouched. But something, curiosity, or perhaps the journalist's disease of chasing truth too far, pulled her forward. She stepped onto the platform. Her boots echoed against the old wood. "Hello," she called softly. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Only the faint hum of the train, deep and rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then, from the far end of the platform, she saw movement, a shadow slipping behind a pillar. Her heart leapt. Someone else was here. She turned her flashlight on, but the beam was weak, barely cutting through the fog. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her attempt at confidence. Still nothing. The shadow didn't return. The silence grew heavier. Clara's gaze drifted back to the open carriage. The air around it seemed denser, almost vibrating with unseen energy. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was a mistake. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to see this, that this train had come for her. Slowly, she climbed the 3 metal steps. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The lights flickered, and for a brief second, she saw her reflection in the window, except it wasn't her. The face staring back was older, pale, and utterly expressionless. Clara gasped and spun around. The carriage was empty. Only the whisper of the train remained steady, alive, and waiting. And as the fog outside thickened into a solid wall of white, the ancient clock above the platform began to tick again, for the first time in 20 years. The door sealed behind Clara with a faint metallic sigh, muffling the world outside. The air inside the train felt heavier, thicker somehow, as if it had been trapped for decades, untouched by time or breath. A faint hum filled the space, low and steady, resonating through the metal floor beneath her feet. The first carriage looked deceptively normal at a glance. Rows of velvet-covered seats faced one another, their fabric faded to a dull crimson. Brass fixtures gleamed faintly in the dim golden light of flickering lamps overhead. Dust motes drifted lazily through the air, but there was no smell of decay, only a strange, sterile scent, sharp and cold like ozone. Clara hesitated, listening. There was no sound of movement, no creak of the train settling on its rails. It was still and naturally still. Even her own breathing seemed loud in that silence. She raised her phone again, though she already knew what she would see. The screen remained black. No signal, no light, just her pale reflection staring back. Okay, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. You're on an empty train. You'll take a few pictures, check it out, then get out. That's all. But as she began walking down the aisle, her footsteps echoing softly against the floor, something about the length of the carriage felt wrong. The further she went, the longer it seemed to stretch. The end of the car didn't get closer. It just stayed the same distance away, as though she were walking in place inside some looping corridor. She stopped, heart pounding. Turning around, she expected to see the door she'd entered through, but it was gone. The aisle behind her stretched backward into the same dim light, repeating endlessly. Clara swallowed hard, her breath quickening. No, no, this can't be real. She took a cautious step back, then another, but the scenery refused to change. Seats, lamps, dust, everything repeated in perfect symmetry, like a mirrored nightmare. A faint whisper brushed past her ear. She spun around. Who's there? Nothing. Her flashlight flickered. For half a second, the beam caught movement at the edge of her vision, a dark figure seated 2 rows ahead. She froze. When the light steadied again, the seat was empty. Her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe a trick of the light. Maybe her nerves. But deep down, she knew something was wrong with this place. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, the very air vibrating in tune with that low hum that hadn't stopped since she entered. At the far end, a door appeared. She hadn't seen it before, but there it was, tarnished brass and fogged glass, faintly etched with numbers she couldn't read. It beckoned her, the only tangible goal in this impossible corridor. Clara hurried toward it, her footsteps faster now, her throat tight with dread. The lamps flickered as she passed, one by one, plunging each section of the carriage into shadow. The hum grew louder. When she finally reached the door, her hand shook as she touched the handle. It was cold, and naturally cold, like touching stone in a crypt. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled it open. The next carriage looked almost identical to the first, except for one thing. Photographs. Hundreds of them. They covered the walls, the seats, even the windows, sepia-toned faces of passengers staring straight ahead, some smiling faintly, others wide-eyed in terror. Each one had a name scrawled beneath it in elegant handwriting, faded but still legible. Clara's breath hitched as she stepped inside. The air here was colder, and a faint electrical buzzing filled the silence. She reached out to touch one of the photos, an older woman in a lace hat, and felt the paper pulse faintly under her fingers, as if it had a heartbeat. She recoiled, wiping her hand on her coat. Her eyes darted to a photograph near the end of the carriage. It showed a man in a conductor's uniform, his face half-shadowed, his eyes unnaturally bright. Then she noticed something even stranger. A few of the photos moved. Not much, just slight shifts, like breathing, or the flicker of a blink. But she saw it, and when she blinked, some of the faces had changed positions, as if they had turned slightly to watch her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This isn't possible, she whispered. From somewhere behind her came the faintest sound of footstep. Slow, deliberate. Clara turned. The door she'd entered from was open again, swinging slightly. A shadow lingered just beyond it, human-shaped, but indistinct in the dim light. She took a step back. Who are you? The shadow didn't move. Then the whisper came again, soft, almost kind. Keep walking. Clara froze. Her heart hammered in her chest. The lamps dimmed, the hum deepened, and suddenly she realized there was no end to the carriages. The train went on forever, stretching into eternity, repeating itself again and again. And somewhere, between those endless carriages, Something waited for her to keep walking. She turned slowly toward the next door, her fear now heavy and cold but helplessly mixed with curiosity. She knew she should turn back, yet there was no back anymore, only forward. With trembling hands, Clara reached for the next handle. As the door creaked open, she heard a voice behind her, faint, distant, and unmistakably human. "Don't look back." She didn't. Clara stepped into the next carriage, expecting more of the same dust, silence, and empty seats. But the moment the door clicked shut behind her, everything changed. The sound came first, not the low hum she had grown used to, but something deeper, like the rolling of distant thunder, muffled yet constant. The air vibrated with it, thick enough to make her chest tighten. The light inside this carriage was different too. Gone was the dim golden glow of old lamps. Now the space was bathed in a pale, cold blue light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The windows were fogged, but behind the mist, strange shadows moved, slow, gliding shapes that didn't belong to any world she knew. Clara's instinct screamed that she shouldn't be here, that she was trespassing in a place where the laws of time and space no longer mattered. And yet, she couldn't stop herself. She walked forward, her hand brushing against the velvet seats. They were warm, too warm, almost pulsing. The fabric seemed to move under her touch, as though the train itself was breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The whispering started again. At first, it was just a faint murmur, impossible to distinguish from the hum of the train. Then the words took form, soft, pleading, and overlapping. Dozens of voices whispering at once. "Help us, please. Don't let it stop. Keep moving, Clara spun around, her flashlight cutting through the mist. The carriage was empty. The whispers stopped instantly, leaving behind an even heavier silence. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to keep walking, though every step felt like sinking deeper into something unseen. The carriage stretched longer than it should. She passed 10 rows of seats, then 20, then 50, but the end of the car didn't seem to get closer. The rhythmic vibration beneath her feet grew stronger, almost like a heartbeat pulsing through the train's bones. She reached for the next door handle. It didn't move. Locked. She rattled it harder, panic beginning to rise. "Come on, open." The train lurched suddenly. The lights flickered, and for a split second, she saw through the fogged windows not the station, not the countryside, but something else entirely. Whitmore. But not as she remembered it. The town outside the windows was alive with people dressed in 1920s clothing, men in hats, women in long coats, children running with paper kites. Steam rose from the streets, cars rattled past, and laughter echoed faintly through the glass. It was like looking into the past. Clara pressed her hand to the window, her breath fogging it further. "What is this?" she whispered. Then the scene changed again. The same street, but now shattered, dark, and abandoned. The buildings burned, smoke filled the air, and a train, the same one she was in, sat derailed in the middle of the road, flames licking its sides. A twisted metal sign read, "Whitmore Line, Accident, 1956." She stumbled back, eyes wide. The lights in the carriage dimmed again. When she looked up, the windows showed something different once more. Whitmore, decades older. The streets were empty, overgrown with vines. The same station she'd entered now lay in ruins, its roof collapsed, its platform buried under layers of moss. The train wasn't moving through space. It was moving through time. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. The train wasn't taking her anywhere on Earth, it was dragging her through echoes of the past and glimpses of the future, forcing her to witness the life and death of the town she thought she knew. A sudden noise snapped her out of her thoughts, a sharp, metallic clang from the front of the carriage. She turned toward it. A silhouette stood at the far end, tall and thin, its posture too still to be human. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Then, slowly, it tilted its head. The motion was unnervingly precise, almost mechanical. Clara's stomach twisted. "Answer me," she shouted, taking a hesitant step forward. A flash of light cut through the carriage, blinding her. When her vision cleared, The figure was gone, but a small object now lay on one of the seats. An old pocket watch, its glass cracked, the second hand twitching erratically. Clara picked it up carefully. The metal was freezing cold. When she turned it over, she saw an engraving on the back, "For those who missed their stop." The train jolted again, violently this time, throwing her against the wall. The lights flickered out completely. In the darkness, the whispers returned, louder, desperate, overlapping like a chorus of trapped souls. "It doesn't stop. It never stops. Keep moving. Keep moving. .. She covered her ears, shaking her head, but the voices were inside her now, vibrating through her skull. "Stop it. Stop." The train began to move faster. She could feel it accelerating, though the scenery outside remained still a blur of fog and flickering images. The floor trembled beneath her. The air roared with unseen energy. Clara clung to the seat to keep her balance. The pocket watch in her hand ticked wildly, the sound grown sharper, faster, until it was all she could hear. Then, with a loud snap, it stopped. Silence. The train slowed to a crawl. The lights flickered back on, weak and colorless. Clara rose shakily to her feet. In front of her, the door to the next carriage creaked open on its own. A faint golden light spilled through the gap, warm and inviting in contrast to the icy blue glow around her. A voice echoed softly through the still air, calm, low, and unmistakably human. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Bennet." Clara froze. The voice came from beyond the door, and it sounded like the conductor. The golden light spilling through the open door pulsed faintly, as if alive. Clara hesitated, her heart hammering in her chest. The voice, low, steady, impossibly calm, still echoed in her ears. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Bennet." It hadn't come from her imagination. It was real. Slowly, she stepped forward. Her boots made no sound on the floor now. Even her breathing seemed to fade into the silence. When she reached the doorway, she paused, peering inside. The next carriage was different. It looked newer, untouched by time or decay. Brass fixtures gleamed. The carpet was clean, and faint music in old waltz played somewhere distant, though no speakers were visible. A faint smell of polished wood and tobacco filled the air. At the far end stood a man. He wore a perfectly pressed conductor's uniform from another era, black coat, silver buttons, cap slightly tilted forward to shadow his eyes. His gloved hands rested neatly on a silver pocket watch, the chain glinting under the soft light. He didn't move when Clara entered. He simply stood there, as if waiting. She swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly, just enough for her to catch the faintest glimpse of his face, pale, ageless, his features too symmetrical to seem entirely human. "I am the conductor of this line," he said. His voice was smooth, measured, and cold. "You boarded without a ticket." Clara took a cautious step back. There was no one at the station, no schedule, no notice. The train wasn't supposed to be there. "Trains rarely arrive for those who expect them," he replied, his tone unreadable. "It stops only when someone is meant to board." She frowned, clutching the broken pocket watch in her hand. "Meant to? What's that supposed to mean?" The conductor took one slow step forward. The sound of his boots echoed unnaturally loud, reverberating through the carriage as though the space itself was amplifying it. "It means," he said, "that the Whitmore line does not take passengers by chance." Her mouth went dry. "This train, it shouldn't exist. It's been gone for decades." He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Has it? Tell me, Miss Bennet? When did you last check the date?" Clara's grip on the pocket watch tightened. "What are you talking about?" "Time," he said softly, "moves differently here. We do not follow the clocks of your world." For a long moment, the only sound was the waltz, distant and distorted. Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Where is this train going?" The conductor's expression darkened. "It doesn't go anywhere. It collects." She took a step back, her eyes darting toward the exit. "Collects what?" "Memories. Regrets. The moments people tried to forget." He paused, then added almost gently, "Sometimes. It collects the people themselves." Clara shook her head. "That's impossible. Everything is impossible until the moment you experience it," he said, his tone almost kind. "You see, everyone who boards this train was once part of Whitmore's story. The lost, the curious, the ones who couldn't let go. You are not the first. I'm not from Whitmore, she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. Aren't you? You were born there, Miss Bennet. 1988. Your parents moved away after the accident near the rail yard, did they not? Clara's breath caught. How do you know that? I know all who ride, he said simply. And I know why you came back. She felt the chill sink deeper into her bones. I came for a story. Everyone says that. His eyes glinted beneath the brim of his cap. But the truth, Miss Bennet, is that you came because you never stopped hearing the train? Her pulse thundered. Memories flashed in her mind nights when she was a child, lying awake, hearing faint echoes in the distance. The rumble of wheels, the low moan of a horn, even though the line had been closed for years. She had convinced herself it was the wind. You've been hearing it your whole life, the conductor continued, because the train remembers you. Clara backed away. I want to leave. He nodded slowly. You can try. Her hand flew to the door handle behind her, but when she turned it, it didn't move. The metal burned her palm. The conductor's voice lowered. The Whitmore line never lets its passengers go until the journey is complete. The waltz began to distort, slowing, deepening, the notes warping like the sound of a record melting under heat. The lamps above flickered. You have three choices, Miss Bennet, he said, stepping closer. You can walk forward and see the truth. You can turn back and relive what you've lost. Or, his eyes locked with hers, you can stay here and fade like the others. The others. She breathed. He gestured to the seats around them. For the first time, Clara noticed faint outlines, shadows, seated where no one sat, figures formed of mist and memory. Their faces were indistinct, but she could feel their eyes on her. She stumbled backward. What are they? Passengers, he said simply. The ones who couldn't decide. The train jolted violently, throwing Clara to her knees. The conductor didn't move. His voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. When the train stops, he said, make your choice quickly. Doors only open once. Then, before she could speak, the lights flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything. The music stopped when the lights returned. The conductor was gone. The only thing left where he had stood was a silver ticket on the floor, its edges glowing faintly. Clara picked it up with trembling hands. It read, Admit 1. Final destination unknown. Behind her, the whistle sounded a long, haunting note that made her blood run cold. The train began to move again. The train shuddered as if protesting its own existence. Clara pressed her back against the wall, every nerve alive with dread. She had expected a carriage, a seat, maybe silence, but what awaited her was something she could not have imagined. Shadows moved among the rows of seats, shifting unnaturally, stretching across the walls like smoke. They were human-shaped, but hollow. No faces, no eyes, only empty darkness where features should have been. Their whispers rose and fell in an impossible rhythm, a chorus of sorrow and accusation that seemed to come from inside her head as much as the carriage. Clara stepped forward cautiously. Her footsteps made no sound on the warped wooden floor. The shadows reacted. They turned toward her as one, flowing like black water into the aisles, reaching with elongated fingers that dissolved into mist before touching her. A cold voice echoed, dripping from every corner. You shouldn't be here. Clara's heart thudded violently. She could feel the temperature drop, her breath visible in small, frightened clouds. Who's there? She whispered. The shadows whispered again, louder now, the words almost intelligible. Remember, remember, you can't hide. Clara froze. Memories flashed unbidden. The night she had lost control, the screams that followed, the feeling of helplessness she had tried to bury for decades. Every shadow seemed to hold a fragment of her past, their movements mimicking moments she had long suppressed. One shadow advanced, coalescing into a shape almost human. It had her father's voice. Why didn't you save him? Her knees buckled. No, it wasn't my fault, she screamed, but the shadow repeated the accusation, louder, echoing against the carriage walls. Another appeared, a faceless woman, pointing toward a door she hadn't noticed before. Compelled, Clara approached it. She reached for the handle, but as her fingers brushed the cold metal, the shadows multiplied. They surged forward, pressing against her from every side. Their whispers became screams, distorted voices crying in grief, fury, regret. Clara staggered back, knocking over a row of seats, but the shadows moved like liquid, flowing around her, closing the aisles. Face them, a voice hissed from somewhere behind the shadows. Clara's heart raced. She tried to run, but the carriage seemed endless. Every turn led her to more shadows, more fragments of the past. She realized with a shock that these weren't just phantoms. They were pieces of her own conscience. The sins she carried, the memories she had ignored, the guilt she had refused to acknowledge. The shadows encircled her, pressing close. She could hear her own breathing, shallow and ragged. Panic clawed at her mind. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The shadows paused, as if hearing her plea. Then, slowly, they began to form shapes, recognizable faces, twisted in sorrow, reaching for her not with malice, but with an urgent, desperate need. They were passengers. Some she had never met, others she had forgotten. All trapped, all bound to this train. Clara realized something. The train was not just a vehicle. It was a repository, a place where the lost, the guilty, and the forgotten congregated, and she was one of them. Unwillingly, the faceless shadow moved to the center of the carriage, stretching its arms wide. You cannot leave without understanding, without seeing what we see. Clara trembled. The air grew thick, heavy, almost suffocating. The whispers became a chant. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she allowed herself to remember every secret, every regret, every choice that had led her here. The train rattled violently, the windows shattering into darkness outside. When she opened her eyes, the shadows were gone. In their place were the faint outlines of people seated quietly, their faces blurred, watching her with calm expectation. The carriage was empty, silent, but she could feel the weight of their gaze. She understood now. The ghosts were not trying to harm her. They were warning her, guiding her toward the truth, and somewhere ahead, she could hear the faintest sound of wheels against rails, the next carriage calling, waiting, promising either salvation or further descent into the labyrinth of the missing train. Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling. She would have to face whatever lay ahead, the next stop, the next revelation. The train waited, and it never let anyone leave until the journey was complete. The train rattled through the darkness like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Clara sat in one of the empty carriages, her reflection flickering in the glass of the window. Outside, there was no landscape, only endless black, rippling as though the world itself had dissolved. She had begun marking the carriages with chalk to remember her path. 12 carriages behind her, all identical, all whispering in their own way. Some smelled of old perfume, some of burnt metal. In one, she heard music that vanished the moment she stepped inside. But this one, the 13th, was different. As she moved down the aisle, her flashlight trembled. The seats were filled with passengers this time, or what looked like passengers. Their heads were turned toward the windows, bodies still, their faces hidden beneath white veils. Clara stopped breathing. She felt that if she made a sound, they would all turn to look at her. A faint voice came from the front of the carriage. "Late again," it whispered. Clara froze. The voice was human, tired, distant, and filled with something she couldn't name. Slowly, she walked forward. The source was a tall man in a dark coat, sitting near the front. He was facing away, his hands gloved, his posture still. "Who are you?" Clara asked, her voice barely holding steady. No answer. The man's head tilted slightly, and she realized he had no face. Not that it was hidden, there was simply nothing there. A smooth, pale surface where features should have been. Yet somehow, she could feel him watching her. "Where are we going?" she whispered. The faceless man turned toward her fully. The air around them grew colder. The lights flickered, and the veiled passengers shifted slightly, as if awakening from sleep. The man stood, towering over her. When he spoke again, his voice came from everywhere, the walls, the floor, her own mind. "The train takes you where you belong, Clara." She stumbled back, hitting one of the veiled passengers. The veil slipped off, and she saw her own face staring back at her, lifeless, eyes open but empty. Clara screamed and fell backward, the sound echoing through the endless carriages. When she opened her eyes again, she was alone. The seats were empty. The veil lay on the floor beside her. She stood, shaking, her breath short and uneven. Something was happening to her mind. Was the train showing her memories, fears, or was it feeding on them? The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around, no one there. Then, a soft tap came from the window beside her. She turned slowly. Outside the window, through the black void, a pale hand pressed against the glass. Her own hand. Clara backed away, heart pounding. The hand began to tap, faster, harder, until cracks formed across the window. She ran, rushing through the door to the next carriage. But, as it closed behind her, she realized the tapping hadn't stopped. It was coming from inside her ears now, like the rhythm of the train itself had merged with her heartbeat. She collapsed onto a seat, gripping her head. "Wake up," she whispered to herself. "Just wake up." But when she looked up, she was no longer in a train carriage. She was standing in her apartment, the same as it had been before she left for Whitmore. Morning light streamed through the curtains. Her coffee cup sat half full. The newspaper on the table read September 12, 2018. She breathed a shaky laugh. It was all a dream, she murmured. Then the radio on the counter clicked on by itself. A voice, the conductor's voice, came through the static. "The next stop is never the same, Miss Carter. Tickets, please." The cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. The reflection in the glass window showed the truth. Behind her stood the faceless man. And then, the whistle of the train returned. The whistle tore through the air like a scream. Clara spun around, but her apartment dissolved into smoke. The walls melted into gray mist, and she was standing once again on the platform of Whitmore Station. Though it was not quite the same, the sky was an endless twilight, neither day nor night. The air shimmered as if reality itself was breathing. Faint silhouettes moved in the fog, people with blurred faces, whispering words that made no sound. Clara's shoes crunched over gravel as she stepped forward. The station sign still read Whitmore Junction, but beneath it, new letters had appeared, carved deep into the metal, for those who never arrived. Her pulse raced. She turned in circles, trying to find an exit. The ticket booth stood empty, its window cracked. The station clock had stopped at 11:47, yet the second hand still trembled, refusing to move. A faint sound echoed from the far end of the platform, the scrape of metal on stone. Clara followed it, her breath visible in the cold air. There, half hidden in the fog, she saw the train again, but now it was motionless, dark, and broken. Its windows were shattered. Its doors hung open like the mouths of graves. She climbed aboard, feeling the weight of silence press against her. The inside smelled of rain and dust. Every seat was empty except one. A small child sat there, legs swinging, wearing an old-fashioned coat and holding a toy train. Clara approached slowly. "Hey, are you lost?" The child didn't look up. "The train stopped," he said softly. "It never does that." "What do you mean?" The boy turned his head slightly. His face was pale, too pale, eyes like glass. "It only stops when someone breaks the rules." Clara knelt beside him. "What rules?" He smiled, a hollow, haunting smile. "The living aren't supposed to stay this long." Before she could speak again, the lights in the carriage flickered. A low rumble shook the floor. The doors slammed shut. The train came alive, groaning like a creature awakening from centuries of sleep. Clara stumbled to her feet. The boy vanished. The toy train clattered to the floor and rolled toward her. When she picked it up, she realized the small, painted name along its side. C. Carter, her own initials. The whistle blared, and the world outside began to move. But what Clara saw through the windows wasn't the landscape she knew. The train was gliding through a realm of floating ruins, vast and silent, pieces of towns suspended in darkness, churches without roofs, streets leading into nothing, faces forming and dissolving in the mist. Then she saw it, a mirror station ahead, identical to Whitmore, yet upside down, hanging in the air. As the train passed through it, gravity seemed to twist. Her body felt light, then impossibly heavy. She clung to the seat, gasping. The loudspeaker crackled. The conductor's voice returned. Passengers are reminded to remain seated. The transition is not yet complete. Transition. Clara shouted, though no one answered. A window shattered beside her. The wind roared in. Through the shards, she saw people falling, not bodies, but shadows, tumbling endlessly into the dark between the two stations. Each shadow looked vaguely human, each face distorted in terror. One of them hit the window and pressed against it from outside, and she saw that it was herself. She screamed, backing away as the glass rippled like water. The shadow reached through, grabbing her wrist. It was cold, not like ice, but like touching something that had never been alive. She tried to pull free, but the harder she struggled, the deeper the shadow's grip sank into her skin. The conductor's voice echoed again. "Not yet, Miss Carter. You haven't reached your stop." Suddenly, the shadow released her. The window sealed shut. The train slowed, screeching as it came to another halt. Clara looked out and saw the sign, "Station Between Worlds." Outside stood hundreds of people, not ghosts, not alive, waiting in silence. Some wore clothes from centuries past, others from the future, and all of them turned toward her as the door opened with a hiss. The conductor was waiting on the platform, holding his pocket watch. He tipped his hat slightly. "You're early, Miss Carter." But then again, this place never did care for time. The air on the platform was heavy, too thick to breathe, too quiet to be natural. The fog hung low, swirling around Clara's feet as if it were alive. Every person waiting at the station between worlds stood perfectly still, heads tilted toward her in an unnatural, silent attention. The conductor stepped forward, his polished shoes tapping against the stone floor. His face remained hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but Clara could see the faint gleam of his smile, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Where am I?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. He tilted his head, as if amused. "You're between departures, Miss Carter. This is where the train rests, where passengers decide which direction they truly wish to travel." Clara looked around, at the crowd, the endless fog, the half-visible doors that lined the platform like gateways to nowhere. "Decide," she repeated. "What do you mean, decide?" "I just want to go home." "Home," the conductor said softly, almost fondly. Such a fragile word, so easily lost. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, brass pocket watch. Its ticking echoed louder than it should have. Deep, rhythmic, hypnotic. He opened it, and Clara saw that it didn't show numbers or hands. Inside was a swirling darkness, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. "This watch," he said, holding it up, "marks the moments between the living and the lost. Every passenger who boards the missing train leaves a trace of time behind. It's how we keep order." Mostly, Clara stared at the strange object. "You said passengers decide. How do I decide?" The conductor gestured toward the crowd. Each of them tried. Some chose wrong. Some refused to choose at all. The figures on the platform began to shift, faces flickering like broken film reels. One moment, they looked human. The next, empty husks, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Clara stepped back, shaking. "What do they want from me?" The conductor took a slow step forward. "They want what you have, the illusion of a destination. You see, Miss Carter, this train doesn't go to places. It goes to truths." His voice deepened as he spoke, resonating through the platform itself. "Every passenger carries a secret. That is the fare. That is the price of passage." Clara's chest tightened. "I don't have any secrets." The conductor chuckled, a low, almost pitying sound. "Everyone does, even you, especially you." The crowd of passengers began to move closer, their faces flickering, whispers crawling through the fog. Clara could hear fragments of sentences, echoes of her own voice. "I should have been there that night. It wasn't my fault," he said. "He'd call me back." Her breath hitched. The words weren't random. They were hers, thoughts she'd buried deep. "No," she whispered. The conductor closed the pocket watch with a snap. "You've been running from the truth, Miss Carter, and the missing train only takes those who can't stop running." A loud creak echoed through the platform. One of the great iron doors began to open, revealing a corridor of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The conductor extended his hand. "It's time you see why you boarded." Clara hesitated. "If I go in there, will I be free?" "Freedom," he said with a smirk, "is just another kind of destination." Something inside the corridor moved, shapes flickering within the light. A woman's voice called her name. Clara froze. It was her mother's voice, soft, trembling, exactly as she remembered it before the accident. She took a step forward, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom," the conductor's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Careful," he warned. "The station shows what you want to see, not what's truly there." Clara turned toward him. "Then tell me what's truly there." He paused. The fog thickened, and for the first time, his voice softened, almost human. "What's there," he said quietly, "is the reason you can't wake up." The platform lights flickered violently. The crowd screamed without sound. The corridor's light exploded outward, swallowing everything. Clara felt herself being pulled in, the conductor's hand slipping away. His final words echoed as the world dissolved into blinding white. "Find your secret, Miss Carter, before the train finds it for you." When Clara opened her eyes, she was lying on the cold floor of a train carriage. Not the broken one, not the fog-shrouded station. This one was spotless, bright, gleaming, almost sterile. Everything shimmered as if freshly polished: glass walls, silver handles, velvet seats lined in perfect symmetry. And yet, there was something wrong. Every surface reflected her, dozens of versions of herself, moving slightly out of sync, their eyes blinking a half-second too late. She rose to her feet slowly. Her reflection did the same, except one. The mirror directly across from her showed her standing still, her throat tightened. "Hello," she whispered. The reflection tilted its head, smiling faintly. Then it spoke, her own voice, but hollow, echoing. "You shouldn't have come this far." Clara stumbled backward, bumping into another mirror. Dozens of her faces stared at her from every angle. "What is this place?" she demanded. "This," said the reflection, stepping closer to the glass, "is where the train keeps what it cannot carry." Clara shook her head. "You're not real." The reflection's smile grew wider, unnatural. "Neither are you." The carriage shuddered. The mirrors rippled like water, and the air grew colder. Whispers filled the space. Fragments of memories, voices of people she once knew. Her editor's voice. "Don't chase ghost stories." Clara, her father's. "You were driving that night, weren't you?" Her own voice. "I didn't mean to leave him there." Clara pressed her hands over her ears. "Stop." But the reflection stepped out of the glass. Not like a ghost. It emerged, the glass stretching around it like skin. It looked exactly like her. Same clothes, same trembling hands, except the eyes were black and endless. "You remember, don't you?" it whispered, circling her. "The accident, the rain, the headlights." Clara's knees weakened. "No." "Yes," the reflection hissed. "You were driving. You and Michael. You argued. You looked away for 1 second. One. The train came out of nowhere." The word train hit her like a blow. She remembered the thunderstorm, the empty crossing, Michael's voice shouting her name, and then blinding light, metal tearing, glass shattering, the sound of a horn that never ended. She staggered backward, gasping. He died." Her reflection stopped smiling. "And you didn't." Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "That's why I'm here," she whispered. "This train. It's that train. The one that hit us." The mirrored walls began to pulse, showing flashes of the crash. Rain, blood, flashing lights. Over and over, like the train itself was replaying the moment she refused to face. The reflection leaned close, its face inches from hers. "You can't leave until you accept what you did." "I didn't mean to." Clara screamed, tears streaking her cheeks. "I tried to save him." The lights flickered. The mirrors cracked. Her reflection's voice softened. "Then stop running." The floor vibrated. The whistle of the train grew louder, echoing through every shard of glass. In the reflections, she saw Michael, standing in the doorway of the next carriage, motionless, his face pale and calm. Clara froze. "Michael," He didn't answer. He simply raised his hand and pointed behind her. She turned. The conductor stood there, hat in hand, eyes dark as coal. "The truth always arrives on time," he said quietly. But few passengers survived the arrival. The train screeched, and every mirror shattered at once. Clara fell to her knees, surrounded by fragments of her own face, each shard whispering her name. The reflections began to fade, dissolving into white mist. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Michael's hand reaching through the smoke, and the conductor's voice, low and final. "One last stop, Miss Carter. Redemption, or return." The world was nothing but light and motion. For a long moment, Clara couldn't tell if she was falling, floating, or standing still. The sound of the train was everywhere, its wheels grinding, its whistle cutting through eternity itself. Then, gradually, shapes began to return, the seats, the windows, the soft flicker of overhead lamps. The missing train was moving again. Clara stood slowly, her body trembling, her mind heavy with fragments of memory. The mirrors were gone, the shadows were gone, but she wasn't alone. Across the aisle sat Michael. He looked exactly as she remembered him. Dark hair damp from the rain, jacket torn at the shoulder, eyes soft and sad. "Michael." Her voice broke. He turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. "You finally remembered." Tears stung her eyes. "I didn't want to. I couldn't. It was my fault." He shook his head gently. "No, it was an accident." Clara stepped closer, her voice rising. "But I was driving. I was the one who lived." He interrupted quietly. "You were meant to? But you never believed it." The carriage trembled as the train sped faster. Outside the windows, there was no world, only endless streaks of light and shadow, flowing like rivers of memory. Michael stood. "You've been trapped here, Clara, not by the train, by yourself. Every carriage, every face, every voice, they were you trying to make sense of what happened." Clara swallowed hard. "Then what is this place?" He looked toward the far end of the carriage, where a single door waited, its frame glowing faintly gold. "The last stop," he said, "where you decide whether to move on, or go back." She stared at the door, her heart pounding. "Go back? To where?" Michael's eyes softened. "To life. To the world that's still waiting for you. But the price is memory. You'll forget me. Forget this. Forget the truth that brought you here." Clara's chest tightened. "And if I move on?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'll finally rest. No more guilt. No more running. Just peace." The train began to slow. The whistle blew one last, haunting note. Through the windows, Clara saw the outline of a station, vast, endless, golden light spilling across the platform. Figures stood there, waiting. Some she recognized, the passengers she'd seen before, now calm and human again. Others were strangers, faces kind and distant. At the center stood the conductor. His hat was off now, his face no longer shadowed. He looked almost human, tired, but gentle. He opened the door to the carriage. "Final destination," he said softly. "Tickets, please." Michael looked at her. "You have to choose, Clara." Her hand trembled. She wanted to stay, to talk to him, to hold onto the one piece of her life she had left. But she also remembered the warmth of the real world, the smell of coffee, the morning sun, the city sounds. "Will I see you again?" she whispered. Michael smiled. "Every time the train whistle blows." She stepped toward the glowing door. The conductor nodded once, almost respectfully. "You've paid your fare." Clara looked back one last time. Michael stood in the aisle, fading, light breaking through him like morning through mist. She whispered, "Goodbye," then she walked through. The moment she crossed the threshold, the light consumed her. The sound of the train faded into the distance. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in a hospital bed. The beeping of a heart monitor filled the room. Nurses rushed around her, voices muffled. A man's voice said, "She's waking up." Clara blinked, gasping for breath. Her hands trembled. She was alive. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. Far away, through the hum of the city, a faint whistle echoed, one she almost didn't hear. She smiled weakly. Somewhere, deep in the fog between worlds, the missing train moved on. its whistle singing softly to the next lost soul searching for the truth.